The crocodile is a global icon, a symbol of effortless style, sophistication, and haute couture. But there is much more to this story, beginning with the man known as the crocodile, Rene Lacoste.
It says Lacoste shirt somewhere on the label, and they say, oh, what a great clothier. Very few people would know, of course, that he was a greater tennis player.
Ça fait partie des premiers grands champions.
We talk about Roger Federer, and we talk about John McEnroe, we talk about Pete Sampras, but he's right up there with these guys.
En effet, on dit le crocodile. Le crocodile, c'était quoi? C'était l'image d'un joueur de tennis qui renvoyait tout, qui ne faisait jamais une erreur.
He was always trying to be perfect.
A legend.
Sharp businessman.
He was an inventor.
Invented the polo shirt.
He created the metal racket.
And went on with the tennis racket in his hands to his last days.
Long before there was a polo shirt adorned with an embroidered crocodile, there was a man who embodied the spirit of tennis. In the roaring 20s, Rene Lacoste was perhaps the best tennis player in the world, winning 7 major singles championships, including 3 French Opens, 2 Wimbledons, and 2 US Opens.
He always had a hat and long pants on, white, all white, and he was known as a tenacious fighter. If he ever got ahead of you, it's a little bit like Tiger today in golf. If he got ahead of you, it was very hard to beat him.
Born into a wealthy Parisian family in 1904, Jean-René Lacoste did not play his first game of tennis until he was 15 years old.
My father started playing tennis when he was about 13 or 14 years old, and he used to borrow the tennis racket of his elder sister. And very quickly, he loved this so much that he did ask my grandfather to give him the opportunity of playing tennis more regularly.
His father said to him, Rene, I'm only going to give you a few years of this tennis, and if you don't get to the top of the game, that's it.
He worked very, very hard at his tennis. He worked on the wall. He hit balls on the wall a lot, then studied his own game.
He watched other players. He kept books on the rest of the people that he would be likely to play against. He studied those.
Perhaps not born with a natural gift for tennis, it was René's discipline, drive, and strategic intelligence that would turn him into a tennis phenomenon.
Lacoste was essentially a baseliner. He knew how to use the court. He made his opponent move, angles, different spins. If he had to come to the net, he could. He had a very complete game, but thoughtful and tough mentally.
He had a very strange game. He would not hit very hard. I remember he had a backhand when he was turning around the ball in a very excessive way, that I might say.
Il faisait des grands coups, des grands revers avec des accompagnements qui étaient au-delà de la ligne des épaules, et il ratait pas.
At the age of 19, René became the final member of the French Davis Cup team that would eventually be known as the Four Musketeers.
Henri Cochet started in a small club in Lyon. Jean Borotra came to tennis very late, started tennis, he was more than 20 years old. And Toto Brugnon, he was the friend of all 3. He could play doubles with Cochet, with Lacoste, with Borotra.
So the Davis Cup was this grand prize in the game of tennis, starting in 1900. A Harvard kid named Dwight Davis gave the cup. And they were determined to bring that cup back to the homeland.
In 1924, Rene Lacoste makes it to the finals of Wimbledon, losing to fellow Frenchman and Davis Cup teammate Henri Cochet. Then in 1925, realizing they were becoming an international tennis power, the French allow foreign competitors to play in the French championships for the first time. Lacoste wins both singles and doubles titles, and then goes on to win singles and doubles titles at Wimbledon. The four Frenchmen would then unite with one common goal, winning the Davis Cup for France.
They were a team, they were traveling together, even if they were rivals.
These four guys were selfless. The team was the thing. It was for La Belle France. That was the idea, the team, l'équipe. Paramount in this goal was to beat Big Bill Tilden. Tilden was the great star of the 1920s, an American.
And they knew they had to beat Tilden once at least over the 3 days.
Ranked as the #1 tennis player in the world from 1920 to 1925, Big Bill Tilden anchored an American team that dominated the Davis Cup for 5 consecutive years. Lacoste then made it his personal mission to defeat Big Bill.
He was practicing all day, and he could work on the grip, he could work on the forehand, he could work on the backhand for hours. The other musketeers told that story that on the boat, going to America, in his cabin, he was playing with the ball, with a soft ball on the wall. He could not stop practicing, he could not stop improving his game.
The French would ultimately fall to the Americans in the finals of the 1925 Davis Cup, but Lacoste would push Tilden to 5 sets, and even had a match point against him in the 3rd set. The French team would consider this a breakthrough. As Rene Lacoste's reputation as a dominant figure in tennis grows, he acquires a nickname that would forever become the man.
One morning in Boston, he was walking and passed by a window of a very fine leather goods manufacturer.
And he sees in a window a wonderful alligator skin suitcase. So he makes a bet with Pierre Gilou, and he said, listen, if I win my game tomorrow, maybe you will offer me the suitcase. And Pierre Gilou said, okay, if you do that, I will. And actually, he lost the game. He didn't get his suitcase, but an American journalist wrote the next day, even though the young Lacoste didn't get his alligator skin suitcase, he fought like a real alligator.
The American press nicknamed him the Alligator because of the bet he made for that alligator skin suitcase. But when he returned home to France, the phrase alligator was lost in translation, and he became Le Crocodile.
He felt so comfortable with that name that he decided to ask one of his friends to draw the design of a crocodile, and had then this design embroidered on the blazer he was wearing.
When he fought, he would hang on. It was like if he bit you, he would just hang on and fight and hang. And that was his nickname in the world of tennis, the Crocodile. And a lot of people referred to Rene Lacoste as the Crocodile, not Rene.
Known now as Le Crocodile for his deliberate style on the courts, he played tennis with his mind as much as his body. The game plan was simple: make the opponent beat himself. And indeed, playing against Rene Lacoste was like playing against a wall. He could and did return virtually any shot, forcing his opponent to try for tougher angles and deeper ground strokes, which in turn led to errors and points for the Crocodile.
Je crois que ce qui différencie Rene Lacoste par rapport aux autres mousquetaires, d'abord, je pense que c'était le visionnaire de l'équipe.
He always had a plan to make sure that all the ingredients were in place so he could produce his best effort.
I am very glad to be here once more in the United States and to play against the American team.
His competition with Big Bill Tilden was the stuff of legend. On a tennis court, Tilden was everything Lacoste was not: powerful, athletic, aggressive, able to bend the ball to his will and punish opponents with strokes of pure genius. So the Crocodile knew that he would have to devise a plan to ultimately bring down Big Bill.
by observation, they find a way to play him.
I use tactics to return the ball with a short swing with which I could play short cross-court shots as well as long shots, making him run. And these tactics were very annoying for him.
Lacoste finally had Tilden's number. He beat Tilden. The U.S. had already clinched the Davis Cup, but that gave everyone hope.
This marked Tilden's first meaningful loss in 7 years. 1 week later, at the U.S. Championship, Lacoste would beat Tilden again. With his victories over Big Bill, Rene Lacoste is named the #1 tennis player in the world in 1926 at the age of 22.
He was the best player in the world at that point. But what's incredible as well is when he was not winning, like his friend was winning, and then when he was not him, it was Henri Cochet who was winning, or Jean Borotra. You have like a Pete Sampras, a Roger Federer, and a John McEnroe playing at the same time from the same country and winning all these slams together.
In 1927, Tilden crossed the pond in an act of defiance to play the French on their home court in the French Championship. Lacoste would once again prevail in a grueling 4-hour, 5-set match. Having an all-French finals at Wimbledon that year, the French would carry significant momentum into their Davis Cup finals against the Americans and Big Bill Tilden. Lacoste would once again devise a plan to bring down the big American.
They decided to play the long match, make a lot of rallies the first day, lob him and playing short balls to him the second day to make him tired for the third day. And the third day, it was possible to beat him.
While the French were down 1-2 to the Americans, Lacoste's strategy to wear down Tilden had worked. Everything Big Bill fired at Lacoste came methodically back, as if the American was hitting balls against the side of a building. Gradually, Lacoste wore down Tilden, parrying every shot like a tennis machine until he won the match in 4 sets.
Rene beat Big Bill to tie it up at 2-all, and then Cochet beat Little Bill, Billy Johnston, and that was it. And the French had the Davis Cup, and they kept it for 6 years.
Je pense que tout ça, il l'avait imaginé, il l'avait interprété dans sa tête, et il est évidemment le grand vecteur, le grand leader de cette réussite.
There were festivities for weeks and months. It was the big thing for French sport, not only for tennis.
To go in the US, beat the US team with Tilden, that was unique.
And after that, they decided to create the stadium.
In a rush, we had to be ready to defend the title September next year. There was only 1 year to find a place, to find finances, and to build a stadium.
With the Davis Cup in tow and a new stadium from which to defend their title, the French team of Henri Cochet, Jean Borotra, Jacques Brugnon, and Le Crocodile Rene Lacoste would now be affectionately known as the Four Musketeers.
And that's how Roland Garros was built, for that precise purpose.
People tend to forget, that Roland Garros is not the site of the French Open. It is a site that was built for Rene Lacoste and Henri Cochet, Jean Borotra and Toto Brugnon.
In 1928, France would continue to dominate the world of tennis, with the men winning every major singles title, as well as a successful defense of the Davis Cup in their new home, Roland Garros. But in the beginning of 1929, after what would be his last major victory as a player in the French championship, Lacoste fell ill, developing tuberculosis and ultimately leaving the crocodile fearful for his health.
For 2 years he didn't know if he'd survive it, because that time wasn't that easy without, obviously, the antibiotics.
He thought that he could not play anymore. He didn't want to let his friends going away without support, so he decided to become the captain. And he won the cup as well as a captain.
Though he retired from playing tennis at the early age of 25, his contributions as the team's captain led France to Davis Cup victories in 1931 and 32. Lacoste's waning health eventually took him off the court altogether and made him even more cautious for his well-being.
Because of, I think, his tuberculosis, he never went out to dinner, to cinema, to theater.
He decided that he needed to be very careful with cold winds, sitting in the front rows of Roland Garros with his big coat, a thick scarf around his neck, and a hat to be sure that even under warm weather and the sun, they would not be the risk of a little cold wind striking him.
While Lacoste had accomplished all of the goals he set out to achieve in tennis, he was always known as a man with a restless mind, one focused on the simple equation of problem plus thought plus effort equals solution. The first problem to be conquered was the tennis shirt. In those days, men often played in long sleeves and full-length trousers, attire better suited for a day at the races than 3 hours of world-class tennis.
My grandfather invented the polo shirt in 1927. Alors, he invented it because when he was playing the US Open, which was at that time at Forest Hills and a little bit earlier, in August actually, the weather conditions were so hot.
He found some fine cotton and somebody who could work with him, and they made what we now call a polo shirt like I'm wearing.
And he invented it basically just for his own use. His friends started to ask him, but René, please, could you make a few for me? And then the friends of his friends, until in 1933, he had this idea of founding a company. Lacoste was founded in 1933 by André Gillier and Rene Lacoste.
My father decided that he wanted to bring to the market, in fact, what is the first modern polo shirt. He decided, in fact, I think against the advice of all those who wanted to give him advice, that placing a little embroidery depicting this alligator on the outside would be a nice idea. Many friends told him that the first thing that a customer would do would to pick up a pair of scissors and cut away that ghastly, stinky, awful-looking animal. Well, apparently, this is not what people felt. Each person who wears the Lacoste products becomes a little advertisement for the product, and that again was a first in the world of fashion.
And when I played the tour 30 years after he did, everybody wanted to wear Lacoste clothing because it was more comfortable, it was better against sun and heat and sweating, and it had the armlet on the shoulders that he created and developed. It was phenomenal.
The great sports writer Paul Gallico once wrote that athletes are the only ones we ask to die twice. But on his retirement from competitive tennis, Rene Lacoste chose not to go gentle into that good night. Just as with his approach to his opponents, Lacoste saw a problem and sought a solution. In this case, The problem was uncomfortable outerwear for a tennis match. The solution? A simple knit shirt that would ultimately inspire a brand and carry on the Lacoste legacy for the better part of a century. Rene Lacoste won fame in tennis. He built a company that catered to his sport. But it might surprise some to learn that the Lacoste family was equally at home on the links. René's wife, Simone Thion de la Chaume, won the British Women's Amateur in 1929. She too was a French celebrity. And when the two were married, it made national news.
My mother, she was, if I'm correct, one of the very first foreigners to win the British Ladies Championship.
She was a fantastic golfer. She was she was champion. She won the British girls first and then British ladies. And she won all that before 21 when she got married.
But the best golfer in the family is their daughter, Catherine. She learned the game at Chantaco, a course built by her grandfather off the Basque coast in Saint-Jean-de-Luz in 1926.
I just played golf until I was about 13, just without taking conscious that I was really doing something special. And then after 13, I started playing a few competitions and started playing a bit better, winning tournaments.
In 1967, as a 22-year-old amateur, Catherine opted not to play in the European Team Championship. Instead, she made the trek to Hot Springs, Virginia, to compete in the U.S. Women's Open.
So I arrived and, I was just a little amateur from France and nobody really thought much about me. And then I started to play in the first round. I had a 71, which wasn't too bad, and was about second. And then after 2 rounds, I was 5 strokes ahead of the field. So I called my parents and said, I'm playing well. I call you on Sunday to know how it finished. And then the last day, in fact, on my father's birthday, which was rather incredible, the 2nd of July, I won the US Open, and I called them, and they were very, very excited, obviously. For them, I think it was incredible excitement. 40 years after, he won also Forest Hills, and it was incredible. One of the stories was rather fun. That, when I went to the States, somebody asked me when the customs, are you Rene Lacoste's daughter? And I said yes. And a few years later, he came back from the United States one day and said, you know what, they asked me at the customs if I was Catherine Lacoste's father. And he was so happy about this. He thought it was the greatest joke.
When she won the Open in 1967, at the age of 22, Catherine Lacoste became the first European to win an LPGA major and is still the only amateur to have won the US Women's Open.
A great golfer, and what she did as an amateur and winning the US Open, it was something amazing, that will be forever, in the golf books and in the history of Lacoste.
And in 1969, Catherine scored an impressive double by winning both the US Women's Amateur and, like her mother, the British Women's Amateur. Then, having won all that she set out to win, Catherine practically gave up the game, never turning pro and never again playing in a top-level individual event. Instead, she chose to pursue family life.
That's another thing of the Lacoste family. They could afford not to turn her pro, obviously, but she loved golf, and her problem and her motivation was to be the number one, to win the US Open, but the problem was not to try to get contracts and get money out of the golf.
It is exceedingly rare for one family to produce great champions in 2 different sports, René and the Musketeers and Catherine, who is arguably the greatest golfer, male or female, that France has ever produced. Like many of the great innovators throughout history, Rene Lacoste's mind was always searching for the solution to any problem that stood in his way. The polo shirt is just one in a long list of problem-solution equations solved by Rene.
You say, okay, we have a problem. How can we solve it?
C'était avant tout quelqu'un qui réfléchissait sur les choses et qui était capable à tout moment d'inventer quelque chose.
You may have seen or heard of a machine he invented to send the balls on a tennis court, which allowed somebody who had no partner in front of him to practice his tennis.
C'était toujours très porteur que de pouvoir discuter avec lui parce qu'il avait toujours une idée, toujours à la recherche de voir ce qu'il pourrait faire, à la limite, pour rapporter quelque chose au tennis.
One of René's most notable ideas was his desire to improve the tennis racket. At a time when tennis players were equipped with basic variations of the same wood rackets, René sought a better, more powerful solution.
We were coming out and playing at this time with wooden rackets. They look always the same, with different colors, sometimes different grip, but the Max Planck Dunlop or the Schlesinger Challenge 1 were exactly the same.
He wanted to find a racket that would be powerful, would have a lot of control, would not bend like wood, would do at the time.
The first day I met him, I was given a teaching lesson, and he came with a wooden box, and he said, "Look, guys, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but I got to show you something. This is my last invention." He opened the box, and there was the steel racket. Nobody has ever seen the steel racket before.
He was a visionary in that he thought wood was not here to stay. He thought it'd be much better to have a metal racket. He came up with the split shaft racket, steel.
And the steel obviously had a lot of flexibility, and he was giving a lot of whip in the ball.
It was a lot lighter than the wooden racket, so you're going to get a lot more power with less swinging effort.
And he sold it to the Wilson people. It became the Wilson T2000. The man who made it famous was Jimmy Connors.
In fact, Jimmy went on to become one of the most prominent figures in the game of tennis, winning a total of 8 Grand Slam singles titles, all of which while wielding the steel racket.
So it was the famous racket that Jimmy Connors or Billie Jean King played with. Actually, it won 46 Grand Slam titles, this racket.
Wilson, at one stage, with the great Jack Kramer, had 12 wooden model Kramer rackets, and they were the largest seller in the world. And then Rene came along with this metal racket, and gradually metal replaced wood rackets.
I would have loved to have been able to serve with the equipment today, or the equipment, say, that Rene developed in that racket of his.
Today, everything is a composite and a graphite, and really Rene started that revolution with the T2000, which was the first and the forerunner of non-wood rackets.
But Rene didn't rest with his success in the steel racket. He embraced the new materials and recognized that with them, there were new challenges. And with new challenges, he sought new solutions.
He made, a great racket. But then when that was done and some other players moved to graphite and other material, he basically, was trying to find a new way to do something different.
And that's why he invented 15 years later, the racket who looked like a guitar, you know, with a vibration absorber.
One time he said, well, Guy, I'd like you to show you something, but don't talk to anybody about it. Can you come really early one morning at the racing club that was in Paris? I want you to try a racket for half an hour and tell me what you think about it. And he pulls out his racket. And he hands it to me, and I'm going, oh my God, I didn't expect something like that. Because the racket it looked like a guitar, you know, like the face was not round, it had like this guitar shape. You know, this is so ridiculous. There's no way I'm gonna play with that racket. Well, I didn't say nothing, of course. And he said, well, you know, I've worked on that racket because I really found out that the sweet spot was bigger with a racket of that size, but you can still have a lot of control that you can have with a smaller head racket. And I said, okay, fine, I'll try it. And I thought, this is rubbish, it's not gonna work for sure. And I was so negative about it that when I hit the first few balls, it felt so good. And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, you know, to be honest, you know, it feels quite good. He said, could you try to play it in the match? And I said, well, I can try, but if I don't play well, you know, I'll switch back to my old one. And he said, no, fine, I understand. And I happened to play the best tennis of my life with that racket.
3 years after its creation, René's unusual guitar-shaped tennis racket helped Guy Forget and the French Davis Cup team bring the cup back to France.
You know, thanks René. What else can I say?
Thank you, René, is a sentiment shared by many, as his restless yet innovative mind led him to invent dozens of items, a practice he continued until the twilight of his life. In 1933, Rene Lacoste founded La Chemise Lacoste and began to produce the tennis shirt he designed and wore on the courts. With the crocodile logo embroidered on the chest, it served as the first example of a brand name appearing on the outside of an article of clothing. The brand has grown considerably since René first donned the shirt in 1927.
After René accomplished in his mind everything that he felt he could do, which is to win the Davis Cup and win his own championships, he felt that he'd accomplished all of his goals, and so it was time to say goodbye. And that's where he went in and showed what a smart guy was to get into the business end of tennis.
And I think he felt that he wanted to get into business and create things. And so he started at a very young age, and he built up an enormous business.
From the very small numbers of crocodiles which were sold in 1933, 75 years ago, we are now at 2 little crocodiles every second, 24 hours a day.
The Lacoste company is a part of the very fabric of French fashion and culture, a national treasure that has become an international symbol of elegance and success. Yet its roots still remain deeply seated within the Lacoste family.
We're very, very close to it. We live with it. For us, it's really a heart, and it's fun because not only mine, but also all the generation after. They love the brand. For them, it's really very important, the crocodile.
It's a mixed feeling between pride, but pride not for myself. I mean, pride for what my grandfather did, for what my Uncle Bernard did. And it's a little bit of pride to be able to at least to do my best to try to continue this family story.
It's a family brand, and that's the way it should be, always, forever, just to keep always the values.
You got to understand the Lacoste company thinks of itself as a French family. They always talk about the Lacoste family.
My brother Bernard very quickly widened the scope of the type of clothing we were making. And then, step by step, he added categories of product. The number of colors available for our basic model increased. Some years we have made over 50 different colors for our basic polo shirt.
It's classic, but it's very elegant, and it's great for sports, the way it fits and the way I perform, with the clothing and to showing all the new styles and the new colors.
After polo shirts, some other categories of products such as shoes, sporting bags, perfumes and fragrances started appearing.
If you look at what has been happening in these past 10 years, I mean, the growth of Lacoste has been absolutely tremendous. We more than doubled our sales, but more than that, we attract today a much younger customer. We are much more into fashion. The US is our number one market, which we did a comeback, which has been absolutely fantastic. And you have new countries like China, like Russia, like India, like Brazil. And this is just the beginning.
Eh bien, c'est l'image de Lacoste. C'est l'image d'une entreprise qui a su vieillir, qui a su grandir, qui a su se modifier à travers le temps et qui a toujours réussi, tout simplement parce que ses dirigeants, ses managers étaient tout à fait remarquables.
Aujourd'hui, on est dans le in quand on parle de Lacoste. C'est extraordinaire. Hein. Il y a combien de marques qui existent comme ça depuis un siècle?
Lacoste is indeed a French brand. I mean, it's part of the French culture. It's one of the best known logos around the world, and certainly in France. In France, it's also part of what I would say the emotional memory of people.
Et pour que la chemise Lacoste, la petite chemise Lacoste, puisqu'au départ il croyait que c'était une petite aventure, devienne un des plus grands fabricants de vêtements de sport au monde.
Et au fur et à mesure qu'on voyageait après, ça nous faisait plaisir que de retrouver à l'étranger, non pas des sportifs qui portaient Lacoste, mais des hommes politiques. Moi, je me souviens de Kennedy qui avait une chemise Lacoste, Nixon, enfin, tous les hommes politiques, je parle en tous les cas aux États-Unis, mais on voyait cette chemise partout et on avait une espèce de fierté que de se dire, nous aussi, on porte cette chemise, mais elle est mondialement connue. Et je crois que tout ça fait que le nom Lacoste est synonyme, de réussite, d'énorme respect et du patrimoine.
Our references to sport elegance and that these values have been there for as long as man. I think this is one of the reasons for which our products have an element of timeliness. We have managed both to keep our roots where they were and stay completely modern. Timeliness does not mean stodginess.
Since creating the first polo shirt 75 years ago, Lacoste has come to represent a modern, unique and high-quality lifestyle, featuring a broad line of items for men, women and children. In fact, Lacoste is one of the most well-known brands in the world, selling 2 Lacoste products a second in 110 countries, 1,000 Lacoste shops and more than 2,000 corners in department stores. Of all the accomplishments one could list about Rene Lacoste, the tennis champion, the ingenious inventor, the successful entrepreneur, perhaps the greatest is one that cannot be measured by patents, trophies, or financial reports. Rather, it is seen through the eyes of the people who have been and are still affected by his spirit.
First of all, I like to say that I think, from my opinion, in the 20th century, he's the #1 sportsman in France.
Pour moi, Lacoste, c'est un esprit, c'est une éducation, c'est une façon de vivre. Et je crois que c'est une des raisons du succès de Lacoste.
When you think of French tennis and the greatness of it, you think of the Musketeers. You think of how much they loved the Davis Cup. I mean, they really enhanced the Davis Cup, not by just their play, but by the way they handled themselves and carried themselves. I mean, they were great sporting gentlemen.
Maybe I learned 2 lessons. The first, how family is important. He was a real family man. And the second lesson is what you do is not important, but do it well.
I think he was so discreet. There were so many things that they should know and that I should know. I think I know very little about him because that was his temper. He wanted only to be in the shadow, but I wish I knew much more about him because his life is certainly fascinating.
J'ai entendu, j'ai lu des livres par rapport à sa régularité, par rapport à son jeu, donc c'est vrai que tout de suite on se réfère à Rene Lacoste. Dès qu'on me parle du crocodile, moi depuis tout jeune, je pense tout de suite à Lacoste.
Et c'est bien qu'un Richard ou que d'autres jeunes puissent parler, s'imprégner un petit peu en lisant des livres, en allant au musée à Roland-Garros, en voyant justement tout ce qui a été fait, tout ce qui est fait par rapport à cette histoire du jeu. Et Rene Lacoste fait partie bien évidemment des personnages qui ont marqué depuis en tant que chercheur et aussi en tant que créateur d'une marque extraordinaire.
You know, with the time I became more familiar with all he did, you know, and it's amazing. It's hard to believe, and what not only him but the whole family.
He was a great athlete. He won everything you could have won at this time: Davis Cup, Grand Slam tournaments, singles, doubles, mixed. He was the captain, winning the Davis Cup, and he was an inventor.
I think we are so gifted, and sometimes we don't realize, you know, how lucky we are. You know, we get to drive really nice cars, we stay in nice hotels, we have nice houses, because tennis got so popular because of people like Rene and all these friends.
I would like all these people to know, understand that this man was a real man, a human being with quite exceptional qualities, but that he is not only a nice picture in some books, that he was a very strong and very present and very human individual.
Of course, we're trying to bring Rene Lacoste in the heart of our history, because he has a great part, and from the 20s until today, he's part of the French tennis development. So it's our duty to make that souvenir very alive, you know, to keep the story going and the book open.
And that story does in fact continue in the place where it began, on the tennis court. The Rene Lacoste Foundation was created to help young people from all over to find a new way through sport, to help them discover team spirit, motivation, how to surpass themselves, and develop a fighting spirit while respecting their adversary. And in this way, passing on the values in which Rene Lacoste believed so strongly.
I think he loved children, he loved tennis. I think he'd have enjoyed it very much. I think it's because, I mean, we wouldn't have done a foundation, Rene Lacoste, that he wouldn't have approved. I think he's always helped people. I don't think anybody knocked at the door and asked for help for him, just turned away. I mean, he always helped people out, and I think youngsters in particular.
I mean, Rene Lacoste Foundation basically is just to do that. It's just to help kids to have a meaning in their life, to help kids have a dream and try to reach that dream.
If there is a cadence in the life of Rene Lacoste, it can be found in the staccato rhythm of a tennis ball bouncing time and again off a wall. His consistent hard work, dedication, and perseverance guided him to become a champion in tennis, in business, and in life. Possessing an undeniable ability to improve everything around him, it is clear that the little boy's desire to succeed in tennis truly helped the men live a life less ordinary.